Okay, picture this. You're on the vacation of a lifetime. Everything is perfect, and then, out of absolutely nowhere, you and your partner get violently, terrifyingly sick. Naturally, you blame the food, maybe the water, but what if the real killer was something you couldn't even see? Let's get into this because it's a truly bizarre medical mystery. So, our story kicks off in the Philippines with this young couple, Marie and Nicolao. They're out exploring the island of Panglao. And I mean, it is a tropical paradise. This is the kind of place where your biggest problem should be which beach to go to, not what happened to them. And their day was just totally normal. They took a ferry, they stopped at a little cafe for a drink and a snack, they grabbed an empanada that had maybe been sitting out for a bit, but who thinks twice about that, right? And then they finally get to their lakeside cabin to just chill out. Everything seemed completely fine. Until it really, really wasn't. So just a little while after they get inside this small, unventilated cabin, both of them start to feel off, like really off. They're getting dizzy, their hearts are just hammering in their chests, and it's getting hard to breathe. All of a sudden, this cozy little retreat starts to feel like a suffocating trap. So they do the logical thing, right? They think, man, it's stuffy in here, let's get some fresh air. But the second they step outside, instead of relief, it's the exact opposite. The moment that fresh air hits them, they both just start vomiting violently. And the dizziness doesn't stop, it just hangs around for hours. I mean, how could fresh air possibly make things worse? It makes no sense. So what's the first thing that jumps into your mind? You've got a young couple, they're traveling, they suddenly get sick with vomiting. I mean, it's gotta be food poisoning, right? It's the most obvious suspect, and that's exactly what everyone figured. And look, the food poisoning theories seemed to fit. At first, that empanada that had been sitting out, the local tap water, sure. But when you look closer, the whole theory just falls apart. For starters, no fever, no diarrhea. Those are the classic signs, and they didn't have them. And here's the real kicker. The vomiting started after they left the room, and then they got completely better on their own. The math just wasn't mathing. Food poisoning was off the table. All right, so if it's not food poisoning, what else could it be? Well, the doctors started chasing down other ideas. Maybe travel anxiety? Pretty unlikely to cause such a crazy physical reaction in two people at the same time. What about heat stroke? Well, no, because their symptoms got worse in the cool, fresh air. That's the opposite of what should happen. And then there's the big one, carbon monoxide poisoning. But CO is deadly, and they recovered on their own after a few hours. That just doesn't fit. Every single lead was a dead end. And this is the moment the whole investigation pivots. Everyone was so focused on what they ate or drank, chasing bacteria, looking for a toxin, but the problem wasn't in their stomachs at all. It was in their lungs. The answer was literally all around them, in the air itself. Which brings us to the one clue that was staring them in the face the whole time, the cabin. It was small, it was impermeable, which basically means it was airtight, and crucially, it had zero ventilation. They had accidentally turned their little vacation spot into a hazardous environment just by breathing. The actual diagnosis? It's a condition called hypercapnia. It's a fancy medical term, but what it means is you have way too much carbon dioxide, CO2, in your blood. This can happen if your lungs aren't working right, or in a case like this, if the room you're in literally runs out of fresh air. So here's the chain reaction that happened to them. Inside that sealed carbon, every time they breathed out, the CO2 had nowhere to go. It just built up in the air and then in their blood. This caused something called respiratory acidosis. That's what made them feel dizzy and made their hearts race. Then, when they walked outside, that sudden blast of oxygen-rich air sent their bodies into a kind of shock. It's called vagal shock. And their body's emergency response? Violent vomiting, just trying desperately to get everything back in balance. And to give you some perspective here, an average person breathes out about half a liter of air with every single breath. Now, imagine two people doing that, over and over, in a tiny, airtight room. In a surprisingly short amount of time, the CO2 levels would just skyrocket, turning the very air they needed to survive into a poison. And when you look at it this way, this one diagnosis explains everything. The dizziness and racing heart while they were inside, that's the high CO2. The crazy vomiting the second they got outside, that's the shock from the sudden change in oxygen. And their full recovery with no medicine? Well, fresh air was the only medicine they needed. It all just clicks into place. This story is more than just a wild medical case. It's a huge reminder of something we all just take for granted. We worry about the quality of our food, the water we drink, but how often do we actually think about the quality of the air we're breathing? Proper ventilation, especially in small, enclosed spaces, isn't just about being comfortable. It's absolutely essential for our health. It really leaves you with a final thought, doesn't it? We spend so much of our lives inside, in rooms and offices that might be more sealed up than we think. This couple's vacation nightmare had a solution, but it really makes you wonder, how often are we all just ignoring the most vital invisible element that's keeping us alive?